In this video, I'm going to show you how to contribute to the DNN documentation website. Fair warning though, I've never done it before, so I'm doing this for the first time to try to give you a first-timer's experience and show you some of the things that you may run into as well. First, you want to go to dnndocs.com and you'll see this page that we're looking at here. Next, you'll want to learn how to contribute to the docs. The folks that maintain this website have done a great job of outlining some of the more important information that you'll need to know when you want to install DNN docs. I've already opened up some of the links that are seen here and some other tabs. This is the location for where all the documentation is actually stored. One of the dependencies for contributing to the documentation is docfx. Again, in full fairness, I don't know exactly everything about docfx, and so as I learn it in this video, I'll describe it more. Next, through an email chain that I've been part of, I've learned that Chocolatey is one of the better ways to install docfx, so we will be using that as well. And we can see that Chocolatey is a package installation manager that helps you with installing Windows applications in very much the same way as Node.js allows you to do so for code-related development. So I'm going to go ahead and install Chocolatey. As necessary throughout the video, if I find areas to fast forward to save time, I will do so. So I'm clicking the Install Chocolatey now. Like with anything else, you'll want to first be sure that you have the minimum requirements. As suggested in the documentation of Chocolatey, I'm going to use PowerShell as one of the options, and I'm going to run it as administrator. As you can see, if you've never used PowerShell before, I just searched for it in the Start menu, and it's very much just a command line tool, just like the command line tool you may be used to or have seen in the past. As suggested in the documentation, I'm simply copying the command line to run. I just pasted in the code, and I'm hitting enter. I've just read through this and it says that I might need to close and reopen the PowerShell application before I can use Choco in this environment. If you run into issues using Choco, you may want to try that. It does say that Choco is ready, so I'm going to try to use it. It appears that it is absolutely installed. Next, I'm going to install docfx. If we look at the documentation in Chocolatey for installing docfx, and especially if you are familiar with Node.js, it's very much the same type of experience, or NuGet for that matter. So I'm going to type choco install docfx. Docfx tends to be a very trusted source for something like this, but we can see that there's a warning that says we should first inspect the PowerShell script that Chocolatey was going to use to install the docfx package. If you are somebody who's concerned about security or just wants to see what is going to happen, that is something you can choose to do. I'm going to say yes for running the script. And the installation is successful. Before I go any further, I went ahead and did a little bit more research on docfx. And it's worth noting that there are two ways to really edit the documentation. If you are non-technical, you should do it right in your web browser without worrying about docfx. And that's highlighted in the documentation here, but we're going to make an edit using that method just to make that a little bit more clear for anybody who might be new to this. So in order to do that, you want to create and log in using an account on GitHub. From there, you can navigate to the content that you want to edit. So, if I look at the URL here, we can see that the content I want to edit is in a content folder, followed by contribute, and then docs. If I go back to GitHub, I go to content, contribute, and docs, just like the URL. The default page for any particular document in a folder or in a path will be called index. If we click on it, we can see all that same content we were just looking at. And now what we can do is choose to try to edit it. There's a pencil right here where we can use to edit this file. Now, if you're not familiar with markup, it's basically just text. So don't get too hung up on the fact that there's characters that you may or may not be used to seeing inside of a document. But if you would like to learn more about markup, you can use the link that's found in the documentation. Now I'm going to make a very minor edit. So what I want to do is make it very clear, or much more obvious to folks that might be new to this, that there are two ways to do this. In fact, I missed that when I first came in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is make an edit to make that obvious. So as you can see, I've added a couple sentences and I've added some new headers to separate these out. Whenever you propose file changes, you'll want to give a reason of why you're doing it and what you've done. So I've given a reason, and now I'm going to propose a file change. At this point, you may feel like this is a little bit intimidating when you first look at this if you've never seen it before. But GitHub does a great job of getting rid of a lot of the technical aspects of what you just did. So if you've never done any kind of code-related development before, especially with something called Git, then you won't know all the intricacies and the command lines that you may have had to perform in order to perform this edit. But don't get discouraged, don't get overwhelmed. What we're seeing here is that in the background, Git has created your repository and created a pull request, and that's an oversimplification for those of you that are far more technical. And now we're creating a pull request. Down below we can see that there's one commit, so we've made one change, we've changed one file, and we are the only contributor right now, and we can also see the information right here that we've supplied when we made the edit. Down below, it shows the differences between what we've done and what was previously there. So it's just highlighting it in a fashion that allows people to see the difference when they're looking at it to determine whether or not to approve this change. So all you have to do as your next step is to click Create Pull Request. At this point, if you want to edit the information that you supplied, you can. Otherwise, click Create Pull Request. The next step is that GitHub will review the change to see if there's any issues with it, and if this is green, you're good to go. And with this particular type of edit, I would never expect for there to be anything different than what you see here. At this point, you've done everything you need to do, and the people that are in charge of approving these updates will review it and then approve it as long as there's no questions or concerns or edits. If there are, you may end up having a dialogue using the comment engine here, and you'll get notifications in your email whenever there's a new update. If we click on pull request, we can see that our pull request is there, and we can click through it on it again to verify that everything is exactly what you just saw before. So at this point, you've done an update. It's that easy. In the time that it's taken me to do the additional research for DocFX, it's only been a few moments, and we can see that my changes are already approved. you would have seen this in your email as well. I highly suggest whenever your changes are approved, you delete your branch. If you don't delete your branch, you might accidentally make edits to that branch, and it will create additional pull requests. At this point, I've deleted the branch, and everything's good to go. One thing to note is that it'll take a little bit of time for these updates to populate into the website, so don't get discouraged if your update is approved and you don't see it immediately. It'll show up soon. Now, in order to use DocFX, and the only reason to use it is to run the documentation site locally, so that way we can do more complex edits and see them locally in our own environment. Since this is not a video on how to use Git or GitHub, I'm going to be very abbreviated with some of the steps I'm going to follow. So if you want to learn more about those particular topics, please let me know in the comments, and I'll supply you with some references on how to get more acquainted with these tools. But in order to continue to go to the next step, I'm going to copy the GitHub clone URL. Now I'm going to paste it in here, and you can see that I've already created a DNN docs folder. And now it's cloning it to my local directory. I could, of course, be using a tool like GitKraken or another IDE, SourceTree, and that would make this easier. Or at least visually easier. Now that I have the repository cloned, I change directory into it, and we can see that it's absolutely there. Now we can try to perform an edit using Visual Studio or any other local environmental tool. One thing to note, it's only been a few minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and we can see my edit is live on the DNN Docs website. Editing in GitHub is the title I gave it, and the description is changed, and I separated the two paragraphs. So at this point, I have a copy of the source code from GitHub in my local environment, and I'm using standard Git practices for this next method of performing an edit. This is going to be the second of three ways that I'm going to show you how to contribute to the DNN docs. So now that we have this folder here, I've also opened it up inside of Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to make an edit to the glossary. If I go to DNN Docs and we go navigate to glossary under the administrator section, I notice that there's two terms missing. One of them is portal and the other is tab. So I'm going to make those edits right now. So now I'm going to navigate to where that is. And again, follow the path. So there's content, administrators, glossary, and it'll be right there at the glossary. Content, administrators, glossary, and here we are. Now an interesting thing is that it's doing an include, so now we're going to have to navigate to it using that. So we have to go down 2 folders to the common folder, and we'll find glossary index. And here we are. Now when we open this in Visual Studio Code, the cool thing is that we can play around with the formatting, and we can see the preview on the right side to give us an idea what it's going to look like on the website. Now we're going to quickly add the information that we were talking about before, which is adding the terms portal and tab, so I'll probably fast forward through this. One of the things that's probably important is follow the same conventions that you see here. So I wouldn't want to use a header in where the portal is. I'm going to just use the same pattern that's already present. One of the things I forgot to do is create a branch, so I'm going to do that now, and I'm just going to call it Glossary Updates. At this time, I've added the terms portal and tab, and you can see I used 2 different commits to make the updates obvious. And if this is a complex update, that might be preferred, so that way we can treat them separately if in case there's concerns about how the update is applied. And if we since I'm using a GUI for this, I can go ahead and see the difference in my commit by selecting it. So we can see that there's portal and here's tab, and I've already pushed it to my own repository. So now I can create a pull request. So here's mine, here's the original location, and now I can do the pull request process either through through GitHub or Git in a command line process. Most people find this method to be a little bit easier. And so I have DNN docs, master, and I have my updates glossary. So I'm going to say added. So I added a description here, create pull request. We can see the rest of the process is exactly the same, and this may get approved as quickly as the last one. Next, I'm going to perform a little bit more complicated of a process to run it locally and see my edits locally before I push them. So in order to get this running locally, I expanded the contribute to DNN docs section here, and we can see get DNN docs running locally. You click on that. So to complete the process of getting the DNN docs running locally, we've already obviously installed Git, we've installed docfx, and we set up the DNN docs project because that's the only way we were able to do that local edit just a moment ago. The next step is to clone the DNN platform repository into our DNN docs repository in order for the API to be able to be documented. This documentation that you see here will be updated by the time this video is live, but it'll have a correct location for you to see, and it mentions a subfolder, but you don't need to create one because the cloning will do that for you. So I'm just going to copy the clone command and I'm going to clone it. So I'm in my DNN docs folder, I just pasted the git clone command, hitting enter, and this will take a little while. So that took a few moments, and that's because the DNN repository is somewhat large. At this point, we just follow the last few steps. So now we can run the DNN project's documentation site locally. So the first thing is to run docfx with the 2 hyphens and then serve. Once we see this last command here, or this last log where it says serving this website on localhost 8080, now we can run that URL on our machine here to see the DNN docs website. In the documentation, it currently says HTTPS, but if you don't have your environment set up for HTTPS, you'll want to use HTTP instead. So I'm going to put in the URL, and there we go. Now I'm going to come up here to this page, so we have the get DNN docs running locally, and while making this video, I've been making edits to the documentation to help improve the documentation for you as well. And so if we go to contribute to the docs, and again, this is my local version of this URL, get DNN docs running locally. When I scroll down to the bottom, we can see that there's a note here that is not in the production version of this website. So if I go back to that URL, we can see that it is indeed different. So I haven't contributed that update yet. One of the things I noticed is that I've updated the documentation to include additional information here, but I don't see it yet. In order for you to see that, all you have to do is run the command docfx serve again to recompile your changes. So this time it went much faster for me, and it should for you as well on subsequent builds. And we can see that same line of log down at the bottom, and we can run our site again to see our updates. And so I just refreshed, and we can see I have additional updates for us to note the URL that is being used or could be used. At this point, just like we did before, I've saved my updates, I have it in a branch, and all you would need to do at this point is just create a pull request. So I hope this video helps you get more comfortable with the DNN Docs project. If you have any additional questions, feel free to put them in the forums or in the comments for the video below.